Hello, greetings and peace and power elevation be to all the beautiful people out there. This your girl Tiffany French coming through here live in effect. And I want to get into the subject about the Angola 3. A lot of us never heard about the Angola 3. Um, they were the three inmates that were locked up in Louisiana State Penitentiary, which at one time was called the Angola Prison. And it's an interesting history behind it because what we would discover that what is now called Louisiana State Penitentiary was once a slave plantation, which was called the Angola, right? And it's located in the area Angola, Louisiana. It was named after the country Angola because majority of the slaves that was brought to Louisiana came about that region. And yeah, so when they was brought from that region to Louisiana area, right? That's when the area, that territory became Angola, Louisiana. And it was known as the Angola prison. So the Angola 3 were the three inmates, and they were part of the Black Panther movement, okay, of Louisiana. It's interesting enough. There's a lot of information, and you can also check out a documentary called The Angola 3 and the Last Slave Plantation. Okay, so you can look it up online. You can watch it on YouTube, Amazon Prime, all those different websites. And also, two of the Angola inmates passed away. And one he just died in 2022. He died at the age of 75 years old. Okay. So this is what really inspired me to do this video. And I haven't heard anything about the Angola 3. I haven't heard much information about them. And since August is Black Month, which honors the political prisoners, those who were bringing about political education and fight for liberation of the oppressed people, particularly those African descended brothers and sisters, it's only right to bring in this subject to the topic of the conversation. All right. And also, as I mentioned, August is my birth month. So, and me and Fred Hampton share the same birthday. Yeah, we share the same birthday. That's really interesting. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. And I want to thank those who have been subscribing, supporting the channel, like the channel, share the channel, and all that great stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get into talking about the Angola 3, and then I am going to also speak on the Louisiana State Penitentiary and its origin history, and share some information about that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get into the Angola 3. Right. So the Angola 3 are three African Americans, former prison inmates: Robert Hillary King, Albert Woodfox, and Herman Wallace, who were held for decades in solitary confinement while in prison at Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola Prison. The latter two were indicted in April 1972 for the killing of a prison correction officer. They were convicted in January 1974. Wallace and Woodfox served more than 40 years in each solitary, the longest period of solitary confinement in American prison history. So King was convicted of a separate prison murder in 1973 and spent 29 years in solitary confinement before his conviction was overturned on appeal. He was released in 2001 after taking a deal started in the late 1990s. Each case was assessed and activists began to work to have the case appealed and conviction overturned because of doubts raised about the original trials. In July of 2013, Amnesty International called for the release of 71-year-old Herman Wallace, who had been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. He was released October the 1st of 2013 due to a judge overturning his original indictment due to the lack of female jurors. The state re-indicted him on October the 3rd, 2013, but he died on October the 4th of 2013 before he could be rearrested. See, on November 20th, 2014, Woodfox's conviction was overturned by the U.S. Court of Appeals. In April 2015, his lawyer applied for an unconditional writ for his release. His unconditional release was decided on June 10th of 2015. He was released on February 19th of 2016 after the prosecution agreed to drop its push for a retrial and accept his plea of no contest to lesser charges of burglary and manslaughter. He said he would have liked the chance to prove his innocence, but chose the plea deal because of his advanced age and health issues. Right. So Woodfox died from COVID-19 complication on August 4th of 2022 at the age of 75. And then it goes on down to speak on the initial imprisonment. So Wallace and Woodfox were each sent to Angola prison in 1971. Wallace was convicted of bank robbery and Woodfox was convicted of armed robbery. And Woodfox was sentenced to 50 years in prison. So Woodfox had escaped from the Orland Parish courthouse during his sentencing hearing and fled to Harlem in New York City. There he was captured and jailed pending extradition to Louisiana. During this period, he met men for the first time who were members of the Black Panther Party. They taught other inmates to read, lead political discussion, and begin his education. For Woodfox, the teachings of the Panthers were revelatory, giving his life a direction and moral meanings he had never previously found. He joined the Black Panther Party and kept his intellectual connection after it dissolved. He began to learn about African American history and the justice system. When returned to Louisiana, Woodfox was incarcerated at Angola. And at Angola, Wallace also became a member of the Black Panthers. He and Woodfox were among activists seeking to improve conditions at the notoriously cruel and violent prison. They helped organize the education of other prisoners and petitions and hunger strikes to protest segregation within the prison and to end widespread rape and violence. They were targeted by the prison administration who feared the politically active prisoners. The day after a prison guard was burnt to death in 1972, 23-year-old prison guard Brent Miller was found dead of multiple stab wounds. Woodfox and Wallace were indicted and convicted of his murder. King also been convicted of robbery, but he was not assigned to Angola until after Miller's murder. He said he was accused of acting as a prison lawyer for other inmates. He was convicted in 1973 in a separate prison. So these three men were soon taken out of the general population and were held in solitary confinement. And also, um, so there's more information. that you guys can look more into. But let's go right here. What says Rahim and Fleming investigation. So in 1997, Malik Rahim, a community activist in New Orleans and a former Black Panther member, together with a young lawyer, Scott Fleming, who had worked as a prisoner advocate while a law student, learned that Wallace, King, and Woodfox were still incarcerated in solitary confinement. Wallace had written to Fleming appealing for help in his case. The two men initiated an investigation of the case, challenging the conclusion of the original investigation at Angola about the murder of Guard Miller, and also raising questions about the conduct of the prisoner's original trial in 1972. Anita Wadick, founder of the Body Shop and known for humanitarian activism, learned about the case from Fleming and helped raise international awareness about the Angola Three. So there's a lot more information that can be found on here. Just come on Wikipedia and you can check it out. Look at the reference at the bottom of the page, and also look at the further reading as well. All right. So and then there's external links. Okay, that can lead to the website regarding to the subject. So it was said to be that this prison happens to be the most corrupted prison and most dangerous one. Now, let's give a little background. For many that don't know, Little Boosie, the rapper, Lil Boosie, he was locked up in that prison. He was locked up in that penitentiary because he was doing life. As a matter of fact, they was trying to put him on death penalty. If anybody can remember that he had death penalty, right? For murder. And he had other charges too. So that's the prison that he was at. Yeah. So let's look at the foundation of this prison. Okay. So just go into a little detail about the Louisiana State Penitentiary. What a history. Check this out. Louisiana State Penitentiary, known as Angola and nicknamed Alcatraz of the South, the Angola Plantation and the Farm, is a maximum security prison farm in Louisiana operated by the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Correction. It is named Angola after the former slave plantation that occupied this territory. The plantation was named after the country of Angola, from which many slaves originated before arriving in Louisiana. So, again, this prison was built on top of the slave plantation. So, at one point in time, before it came into existence, it was a slave plantation known as Angola. And from there, the reason why it got its name, because it was named after the country Angola, where many of the slaves was coming from that was sent to Louisiana. But let's go ahead and let's continue. Now it says Angola is the largest maximum security prison in the United States, with 6,300 prisoners and 1,800 staff, including correction officers, janitors, maintenance, and wardens. Due to these large numbers, it has been given a nickname, a gated community. Located in West Feliciana Parish, the prison is set between Oxbow Lakes on the east side of a bend of the Mississippi River, so it is flanked on three sides by water. It lies less than 2 miles, 3 kilometers south of Louisiana Strait east-west border with Mississippi. The 28 square miles of land the prison sits on what's known before the American Civil War as the Angola Plantation was owned by Isaac Franklin. The prison is located at the end of Louisiana Highway 66, around 22 miles kilometer northwest of Francisville, death row for men, and the state execution chamber for women and men are located at the Angola facility. Okay, so before 1835, state inmates were held in a jail in New Orleans. The first Louisiana State Penitentiary, located at the intersection of 6th and Laurel Street in Baton Rouge, was modeled on a prison in Westerville, Connecticut. It was built to house 100 convicts in cells of 6 foot by 3.5 feet. In 1844, the state leased operation of the prison and its prisoners to Manhattan Pratt and Company, a private company. All right. And it says, during the American Civil War, Union soldiers occupied the prison in Baton Rouge. In 1869, during the Reconstruction era, Samuel Lawrence James, a former Confederate major, received a military lease to the future prison property along the Mississippi River. He tried to produce cotton with the forced labor of African Americans. And now when you go down, it says the land that has been developed as Angola Penitentiary was purchased in 1830s from Francis Root as Fort Cottage's Plantation by Isaac Franklin. He was a planter and slave trader, co-owner of the profitable slave trading firm Franklin and Armfield of Alexandria, Virginia, and Natchez, Mississippi. After his death in 1846, Franklin's widow, by then known as Adelicia Chittum, joined these plantations. Panola, Bellevue, Carolina, and Angola when she sold them all in 1880 to Samuel Lawrence James, the former CSA officer. The Angola plantation was named for the country on the west coast of southern Africa, from which many of its slaves had come. It contained a building called the Old Slave Quarters. Under the convict lease system, Major James ran his vast plantation using convicts leased from the state as his workers. He was responsible for their room and board and had virtually total authority over them. With the incentive to earn money from prisoners, the state passed laws directed at African Americans, requiring payment of minor fees and fines as punishment for infractions. Cash poor men in the agricultural economy were forced into jail and convict labor. Such convicts were frequently abused, underfed, and subject to unregulated violence. The state exercised little oversight of condition. Prisoners were often worked to death under harsh condition. James died in 1894. Damn. Let's look at the slave quarters. All right, so what is that? It's called barracoon. Barracoon, right, is the augmentative form of the Catalan loanword. It's a type of barracks used historically for the internment of slaves or criminals. So basically, that was like the earliest form of jail, basically. In the Atlantic slave trade, captured individuals were temporarily transported to and held at the barracoons along the coast of West Africa where they awaited transportation across the Atlantic Ocean. A barracoon simplified the slave traders' job of keeping the prospective slaves alive and in captivity, with the barracks being closely guarded and the captives being fed and allowed exercise. Barracoons vary in size and design, from small enclosure adjacent to the businesses of European traders to larger protected buildings. The amount of time slaves spent inside a barracoon depended primarily on two factors: their health and the availability of slave ships. Many captive slaves died in barracoons, some as a consequence of the hardship they experienced on their journey, and some as a result of their exposure to lethal European disease to which they had little immunity. Damn. So there's a book that Zora Neale Hurston wrote. It's called The Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo, a nonfiction based on her interview with Cujo Lewis. Wow. So as you can see, it's a lot of stuff here. Seasoning, Atlantic Creole, House of Slaves, Cinderay. There's a lot of stuff that could be found on here. So let's not, as people, we shouldn't necessarily underestimate Wikipedia. I mean, you always want to go back and verify sources or whatnot, but there's a lot of great stuff that you can discover on Wikipedia, and it comes with full of surprises. It really does. All right. So, anyways, let me show you guys the reference. And let me pull up this. This is the first article I want to put up for y'all. This one's called Solitary Confinement Isn't Punishment, It's Torture. And this comes from Rock, Working to Extend Democracy to All, September 2015. And then let's go ahead, let's look into it by Jasmine Heiss. Albert Woodfox sits alone in a cell smaller than the average parking space. Unless it is one of the 3 days that he gets to stretch his legs in the prison yard, the 68-year-old will likely remain caged in these conditions for 24 hours today. The four walls are solid, save a single small window that looks into the parking lot, as is the metal door in front of him. His isolation is complete even from others prisoners in nearby cell. He has spent more than half of his life in this nightmare. Woodfox, who has the dubious honor of being the United States' longest serving prisoner in solitary confinement, is just one of an estimate 80,000 people held in solitary confinement on any given day in the United States. He has described the physical and mental anguish of solitary as standing on the edge of nothingness, looking at emptiness. And again, you can check this out on criminallegalnews.org. And the name of it is Rock. So I put in the sources in the description link for you guys if you want to check it out. All right, so and then there's this other website called the Angola 3. Okay, this is the Angola 3 website if you guys want to look into that. All right, so it gives the list of each of these individuals. As you can see, they represent the Black Panthers. So Robert King got out in 2001, February 2001. Herman Wallace, October of 2013. and Albert Woodfoss of February 2016. Okay. And so this one talks about the passing of Albert Woodfoss from NPR.org. Okay, that's Albert Woodfoss right here. And he passed away at the age of 75 due to COVID. All right, so he also has a book that he's written as well. But before I get to the book, I just want to show you guys another article. So this article here goes into the history about the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Okay. And it's called Before Angola Enslaved Prisoners in the Louisiana State Penitentiary by Jeff Foray. So if you guys want to, you can look up on JASTOR.org, which stands for Journal Storage. You go on here and then you just type in Before Angola Enslaved Prisoner in the United States. So make sure you guys sign up if you're going to use this website. Okay. Or, if you want to purchase it, they have where you can buy it and pay for it. These are journal articles, so they are pretty reliable sources. If they weren't reliable, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. So it's just a way to always make sure you back up information that's being presented on Wikipedia or any other website. I always want to make sure that you get the proper reference, information that's peer review. Trust that the source is very so reliable. Okay. So, you always want to double check. And that's the whole purpose. So I don't know if I want to. Nah, I don't think I will go over this, but it's just something that you guys can look into. Okay, just right here, right here. Find out more information. Then the book is also based about the story of the Louisiana State Penitentiary. This one's called Dying to Tell, Angola Crime Consequence Conclusion at Louisiana State Penitentiary by Ann Butler and C. Murray Henderson. All right, so basically going into the story about what happens behind the Louisiana penitentiary, the harsh conditioning, and the ongoing rape taking place. If you guys ever watched the Angola 3 documentary, they talk about the harsh condition that these inmates had to deal with, and then go into the history about the Black Panther, and then talk about the US movement. And not only do they discuss the US movement, but also how the FBI pretty much pinned these organizations against one another, and how the inmates were basically treated like the slaves on the plantation, like actual slaves. And then those who didn't last very long, they pretty much just tossed them to the side, tossed them over, and get the other inmates to finish whatever they left off. So it goes into deep history about these 3 inmates being in solitary confinement. And for those of you that don't know what solitary confinement is, they call that the hole. So it's a hole basically meaning that you're in a cell by yourself. You're in the cell by yourself with no one. And you have to be in there for 24 hours. And what the guards will usually do is when they put somebody in a hole, they'll either have the inmate stand at the door looking at the window. It's a little small window shield, and they have to stand there and look at that window. until the guard tells them that they can relax and sit down, whatever. But other than that, yeah, they usually have to stand up. Imagine standing on your feet. And then imagine not being able to go outside for 24 hours. You sit in a hole. And depends on the condition. It could be hot, the temperature. It could be hot or it could be cold. But normally the jail cells are cold, right? So you in there by yourself, no visitation. You can't join the general population. Yeah, you can't join the general population. You can't interact with nobody. You just stuck. You just sitting in there. And it's no fun. It's no fun because people like that, they actually suffer. They suffer a heart condition. They suffer health issues being in a hole. So it's plenty of stories about that particular prison. And I'm quite sure that some can find interviews where Lil Boosie talk about his experience of being locked up at that particular location during that time when he was going through the trials of murder and all this extra stuff. Um, I know he spoke about his experience and how pretty much how harsh it is. But yeah, a prison that was once known as a plantation. I mean, it made sense, right? Because it started off as a slave plantation, and then from a slave plantation, it became a state penitentiary. All right, so again, if you guys want to check this book out, it's called Dying to Tell. And I posted in the description link, in the description section. So when you go in my description section on this channel, you guys can see the title of the book. Also, autobiography of Albert Woodfox. So Albert Woodfox written this book when he was alive, right after he got out of jail. Okay. It's called Solitary. Unbroken by 4 decades in solitary confinement. My story of transformation and hope, Albert Woodfox. All right. So basically, it's his memoir. It's his memoir. It's his autobiography. But let's look at this poem right here he written. Echoes. Echo of wisdom I often hear. A mother's strength softly in my ears. Echoes of womanhood shining so bright. Echoes of a mother within darkest night. Echoes of wisdom on my mother's lip, too young to understand it was in a gentle kiss. Echoes of love and echoes of fear. Arrogance of manhood wouldn't let me hear. Echoes of heartache I still hold close as I mourn the loss of my one true hero. Echoes from a mother's womb, heartbeats held so dear. Life begins with a fist tears. Echoes of footsteps taken in past. Echoes of manhood standing in a looking glass. Echoes of motherhood, gentle and near. Echoes of a lost mother I will always hear. That's deep. And that one touched me to the soul. But here's the list of chapters. All right, here's the chapters. So, again, if anybody want to check this book out, and also I have it in my description link. It's called Solitary. Yes. All right, and that's it. That's all. So, I appreciate those who have been watching, who has been supporting my channel. And until next time, please be safe, and peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm saying deuces. All right. And I'll talk to you all later.